CodeX group meeting. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all. I'm Roland Vogel. I'm CodeX Executive Director. And we have 4 visitors today, guests today. Hirsch, who's the director of LIZ, which is the Legal Innovation Zone from Canada. Then we have Sean, the co-founder of Minutebox, and James, co-founder of NL Patent, and Mark, the CEO of Alexei. So 4 very interesting efforts in our legal innovation space, and we're excited to learn from you all. We have an hour for this meeting, so that leaves about 15 minutes to each presenter. And ideally, you would just spend half of that just to introduce your project or your company, and then leave the other half for discussion with the group. So with that, I think, I just wanted to see if anyone had any news to share, any updates. Perhaps the best, since we're a little bit pressed for time, the best would be if you could do that in the chat. And yeah, so with that, I'll just turn it over to Hirsch. Hirsch, are you there?
I am here, and thank you very much for having us, Roland. It is great to see you. My name is Hirsch Perlis. I am the co-founder and director of the Legal Innovation Zone out of Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly known as Ryerson University in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Again, thanks so much for having us. I also see my co-founder and managing director, Chris Bentley, is on the line. So great to have him here as well. I'm just going to take 5 minutes of that 15 minutes and talk about what the Legal Innovation Zone is, and I will try and leave a little bit more time for our startups to talk about the great work that they are doing. So the Legal Innovation Zone was founded about 7.5 years ago with the goal of building better solutions for the consumers of legal services. And when we talk about consumers, we focus both on individuals and businesses. We do that in 3 main ways. One is incubation, the second is supporting innovation agendas, and the third we cheekily call designing and developing the 21st century justice system. Our incubation program, as I mentioned, we started about 7.5 years ago. When we launched it, we said we were Canada's first legal tech incubator. At our second birthday, we said we were North America's, and after Chris and I had spoken around the world and traveled, we realized we were probably the first ones, and no one's called us out on that yet. So we call ourselves the world's first legal tech incubator. We support about 15 to 20 companies at a time out of our space. You're hearing from 3 of them later on today. Some of the companies are high AI, blockchain, and other stuff like that. And some are simple technologies or process oriented that make a huge difference in the law. And some of them are selling direct to law firms, some of them sell to corporations, some of them go direct to consumers. We provide them with mentorship, advisors, access to funding, and obviously the community of legal tech entrepreneurs that are in our space are very, very important. Just before COVID, we launched 2 online programs. One is a 6-week program called Concept Framework, and another is a 12-week program called Sprint Studio. These were designed so that we could support entrepreneurs, legal tech entrepreneurs from around the world. We run those 1 cohort every year. And yeah, you can go to our website for more information on that. We've supported companies from every single continent outside of Antarctica because we haven't found penguins are very interested in legal tech. But if anyone knows great entrepreneurs in Antarctica, please let us know. The second area we focus on is partnerships. We deal with transformation and innovation insights. We've partnered with large law firms. Osler is one of our oldest partners. We've partnered with every level of government in Canada and various other corporations in Canada on their innovation agendas, whether that's transformation projects of discovery or validation and execution of new projects or innovation insights. So Chris and I are working with their leadership and identifying different opportunities and talking about what is out there. And the third area we focus on, as I mentioned, is designing and developing the 21st century justice system. And that's really our way to cause trouble in the sandbox and frankly, give our entrepreneurs and others more room to operate. And we early on focused heavily on family law and received some private funding and built what's called the Family Law Portal, which is a place where people can go for free to learn about their rights and responsibilities when going through the separation process. Over COVID, we did a lot more work around re-regulation or deregulation. And we are about to launch a new project, which hopefully some of you will hear about shortly, coming up in the next couple of weeks. So that is who the Legal Innovation Zone is. And most importantly, we are very proud of all of our founders. So I'm happy to give my time over to the three great founders that we have here today. Roland, thanks again for having the Legal Innovation Zone. And yeah, I'll hand it back.
Yeah, thank you, Hirsch. Thank you for that context. And you know, I think you said nobody has called you out yet on being the first legal tech incubator. I know there's several efforts that were started. Sometimes people think CodeX is an incubator, but we're a research center. We have lots of entrepreneurial folks in our community, but we are not, you know, by design, you know, an incubator, and we're not, you know, dealing with, you're not providing funding to startups, nor do we take equity. And so how was this set up? It was set up by your law school, and can you just tell us a little bit more about the background on how it came together?
Yeah, we actually were created before our law school. Our law school is actually only 2.5 years old, so we came in before our law school, and really we were born out of two things. One is a program called the Law Practice Program, which is a very innovative online program which Chris created about 10 years ago now, which is an alternative to articling. So in Ontario and Canada, you have to article to become a lawyer, so that you do that after law school, and there weren't enough positions. So Chris created that program about 10 years ago for our law society. And when he was doing that, Ryerson, at the time it was called Ryerson, was very well known for their big business incubator called the DMZ. And so his office was in the DMZ. He went to the president and asked how many of these companies are doing anything in the law. The answer at the time of their 80 companies were none. And that's when Chris went to the president of Ryerson and said, if any sector needs innovation, it's the law. I want to set up this incubator called the Legal Innovation Zone. And so he went to the president and called me up and said, Hirsch, are you interested in helping me? And he's the lawyer, I'm the non-lawyer, and the two of us tackled it 7.5 years ago.
Great. Wow, that's a great story. Thank you so much, Hirsch. So who of your cohort, who wants to go first then? Is Sean going to go first from MinuteBox, or that's how we announced it, at least?
I think I've been tasked.
Okay. All right. So take it away, Sean.
Thank you so much, Roland. A real pleasure to present MinuteBox here to all of the individuals related to CodeX. I've known Hirsch for probably since the beginning of the Legal Innovation Zone, and we are a very proud participant in the program. They've certainly helped us grow. Just as a little bit of a background on myself, I'm one of the co-founders and currently the COO of a company called MinuteBox. I'm a former corporate lawyer, having worked at one of the leading firms in Canada, one of what we would call our 7 sisters. And like most people who enter in the innovation space, I had a problem as it related to legal work. Mine was really just a collection of 40 or 50 physical binders that were sitting in office.
So we're picking up a little bit of background noise. Folks, can you please put yourself on mute? Thank you.
Great. I had 40 or 50 physical minute book binders, and oftentimes the nomenclature of what a minute book can vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but really it is just a collection of corporate information and documents related to companies or entities that law firms typically tend to manage, whether it's holding companies, actual parent companies, large corporations, even things like trusts. They're always kept in large physical binders in a location somewhere. And those of us who are in the innovation space should realize that usually when we're relying on physical information, there can be natural bottlenecks. And everything from finding books, accessing information, everything that was basic, your stock certificates, all the way having things like articles and bylaws, very basic but necessary information. And what we've done as a solution is to take that information, and if it is digital, or excuse me, if it is physical, we digitize it. If it is digital, we migrate it over to our cloud-based platform. And we empower law firms, large corporations, to be able to access the information on our system, review it, share it, update it, and effectively transformed what was typically a physical binder into a collection of data points. And our software functions with a series of very strong pillars, the first being the storage of a digital document or a PDF document. The second, and the most important, being the collection of data How do we know who our directors are? Well, our database is going to indicate to us exactly who they are, when they were elected, and when that information needs to be adjusted or modified. How can we produce documents? With a simple button click based off data changes using internal precedents, you no longer have to open up Microsoft Word, manually go in, even when you're doing very large or complex transactions. And finally, the ability to send things off for electronic signature, to have them stored automatically in our digital minute book, as well as have things round trip once they're complete, and also file with the requisite governing bodies. We are currently jurisdiction agnostic. So although we are Canadian based, we're working with some of the largest law firms in the country, connecting with many amazing law firms and working with them throughout the United States, as well as corporations and firms overseas. It turns out, and this is a rather universal concept, nobody actually likes minute books. And the reason isn't because they're so nasty, but more so because there's a lot of tedium associated with keeping these books up to date, keeping their records centralized, making them easily accessible. This all falls under the category of what we would consider commoditized legal work. That is to say, things that may not be necessarily complicated from a legal perspective, but always need to be done, and unfortunately are a lot more inefficient over the courses of years than they actually should be. And that's where a solution like MinuteBox comes in. So using my experience and the experience of my co-founders, we're able to build a solution. In a moment, I'm going to share my screen. We'll walk through a very, very high-level overview about what the heck it is we do. But before I do want to share with everyone that today is actually our 5-year anniversary of incorporation. And so we started off with just a handful of people to a team of well over 30, and we're actually in Montreal celebrating as a company this glorious day. So let me share my screen, and we'll walk through a very little overview on what the heck corporate minute book work actually is. So this is our dashboard on our cloud-based system, and you can see here, we've got a whole bunch of data and information, even before we start jumping into the actual minute books themselves, and everything can reorganize and adjust depending upon what data you want to see. The ability to have something searchable, believe it or not, is actually revolutionary. What we're doing here is we are replacing the shelves and shelves and rooms in downtown offices with a virtual minute book room. This is how we start to see our information at a 10,000-foot level. But we are not just dealing with basic entity information, we're dealing with dates. We're dealing with task management. All of those things typically that are associated or able to be tracked or required to be tracked on manual spreadsheets by clerks and paralegals. Now there's a central way to be able to track and capture that information accordingly. So we'll start with the first pillar, what I talked about before. How do we actually view minute book documents? And you can see, those of you who are aware and have worked with minute book documents in the past, it's a virtual minute book. There are only so many ways to gussy this up, and it's a great feeling because we now have the ability to see exactly what it is we're looking for. We can search this information, we can rearrange it, we can adjust names, etc. And we can also share this information externally. And so this is a very value-added tool because law firms can now grant read-only access to whatever degree of granularity they want to their customers, their clients, banks, accountants, etc. Users also have the ability to move information around. Let's move pages here. Let's add additional documents. And we can also, if we so desire, send pages off for electronic signature using our DocuSign integration. So this is how we store documents. This is how everything is central. But as I mentioned initially, data goes to the very heart of the MinuteBox platform. And we have what's called our entity information summary, or the database for short. All of these other fields and features are related first and foremost to data. And what we can see here is within this database, we can add any bit of information we absolutely want. And we don't have to rely simply on clicking the add button to add the information. We've got all sorts of automations. For example, if we know the address is going to be the same, I'm just going to go here and I'm going to type in the word address, and it's going to bring up one of my automations, which is the standard address I happen to have here. I'm going to click OK, and now my data populates in here for me automatically. Everything like business numbers, directors, officers, etc., can all be tracked. Directly associated with this data here are ledgers and registers, which again, automatically tracked, and we do everything from securities matters, land registrations, all the things that for different legislation require you to track are all done here, captured accordingly, and all up to date. I want to spend just a little bit of time looking at share capital because Minutebox has evolved from capturing everything from very simple common classes of shares all the way through to things like option pools, general partnership interests, convertible debt, warrants, etc. And our internal cap table function can manage all of those features as well. We are jurisdiction agnostic. So let me go up here and we can see that we capture information for any Canadian jurisdiction, any American jurisdiction, or if you happen to have entities over in South Africa or Singapore or anywhere else around the world, we can capture that information internally accordingly. And we are also entity type, meaning we can capture information for trusts, LLCs, and literally any entity type you can imagine worldwide. Let's take a look here. From this data, we can also generate a cap table. These oftentimes, especially with large firms dealing with fast-growing high technology companies, this information is typically captured on an Excel spreadsheet or other pieces of software. But now we're allowed to see it directly related to the share capital component in Minutebox. And you can see we're looking at not just equity, but we can also capture things like options, warrants, units if we're dealing with different kinds of entity types like LLCs, etc. We're also showing the information on a fully diluted basis. And then we have things like ownership charts. Typically, each one of these modules was always done manually, and it was always time consuming. And unfortunately, it wasn't always done correctly. But with data, we can take it all, rearrange it in a whole bunch of different ways, and ensure we're getting summaries of all of the data accordingly. So data is very powerful. Automations are already built in. But then once we've got everything built out, that is to say, from a data perspective, how do we go ahead and generate documents? Let's say, for example, I've got my issuance of some stock here, and I've got an internal precedent that can capture this information. Well, I'm just going to click this magic button here called Save and Document, and I'm going to find the precedent that I want to use. In this case, it is the share subscription. I'm going to double click, and I'm automatically going to be taken to the issuance document filled in with all of the data accordingly. And this, while it looks really cool, is not yet a document. This is just data. So I can add in things like mailing address is, well, if I don't know the mailing address, all I need to do is click the / command and start typing in address. And let's find the full address. What is the full address that we want? We've got a bunch of mailing addresses here. Let's assume it's this one. And now if I want to, I can download it, export it into a PDF or Word document. I can even add it directly to the minute book, send it off for electronic signature, etc. But all of those steps would typically take a lot longer than it needs to for the production of documents and the entering of the data. And now everything is just a simple button click at our fingertips. So we've taken a lot of the tedium that was associated with all kinds of minute book and entity management requirements and reduced it to what I think is a series of fun and enjoyable button clicks in order to get the output that you're exactly looking for. I'm going to stop there. There's obviously a whole bunch of other things I can show you, everything from our compliance modules to our electronic filing. But the idea here is when Minutebox users become seasoned in how to set up automations, how to produce documents, etc., you're not going to be spending that much time on the platform. Get in, get out, and then be able to move on to far more value-added kinds of legal work. I'll stop my screen share right there. I'm happy to answer any questions about whether it's my journey in terms of how I got here or any particular questions about the software as well.
Great, Sean. Thank you so much. So that's very interesting. I'm not too familiar with, the kinds of things you have to track in terms of corporate minutes. And I got a bit of a sense from your presentation, but it certainly seems very useful in terms of serving as a database to store corporate documents. But then you also showed that you can generate certain documents that you need for that. And so there's another company that or there's other companies that sort of focus on that around the whole sort of early stage company ecosystem, and they have workflows in them. Like you might be familiar with Shoebox, for example. They have like series of workflows, and every time you have a board consent or you want to hire an employee, they have the content in there. So I'm curious, I guess, to how much that is part of, you know, how is it divided now? Is it sort of mostly a repository, or are you also, you know, generating workflows where you can involve the necessary stakeholders, like, you know, board members and so on, and then get e-signature and get it stored in your system? And what's your, you know, what's your perspective on this in the future? Is that becoming a more important aspect of what you're doing?
Absolutely. And it's a really good question. So Minutebox does incorporate elements of project management where you can set up things like tasks, reminders, etc., not just for elements associated with the data from a particular minute book, but also with, I have to do X, Y, Z in order to ensure this minute book is compliant from an individual task management perspective. I will say I am familiar with a lot of the automation tools in the legal side that may go not necessarily from B2B, that is to say, from a business to either a law firm or large corporation, but may go down, for example, B2C or an entrepreneur. Our experience when dealing with, and this goes back to myself and my co-founders, when dealing with elements of corporate law, are that they can be easy to produce. However, the understanding of why they're easy to produce can be complex. So for example, if we were to build a tool designed solely for entrepreneurs that would enable them or empower them to do things like produce stock certificates or generate their annuals, that would be an amazing thing. Unfortunately, giving them that kind of power means they may not understand the consequences of issuing stock, of creating these kinds of very simple documents from an output perspective, but the legal ramifications that may exist. So our clients typically are law firms who are seasoned in understanding all elements of corporate law, very large corporations, etc. And the system is robust enough to allow them who need that very complex resource to do very complicated kinds of legal transactions from within our system as well. We do have a lot of pre-populated information, tools and automations, etc. But one advantage of what Minutebox has created is we've made it very simple for law firms to create their own information in there, their own customizations and task management, because everything is just a button click. So it's not so structured that we have to tell them how they have to use it, but rather giving them a lot of freedom so that they can be empowered to develop the kind of workflow they want internally.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Bruce, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks for a great presentation. I'm always curious how either a GC or whomever would think about obsolescence with a system like this. You know, how all of the enterprise risks that they would take in managing their portfolio through you for compliance purposes. God forbid you don't get to Gibby's for your 10th anniversary celebration. What interoperability, what almost ISO standard would protect this data and the linkages within that data? I mean, I'm not saying you have to be responsible for that, but in working with the data, what would you foresee for the legal community that might evolve into some sort of an ISO standard to protect against that kind of non-interoperability or loss of data, loss of functionality?
It's a great question. And just to make sure I understand, what happens if someone can't get their data off, or heaven forbid something happens to Minutebox from a risk standpoint?
Yes.
Yeah,
I
it's a
mean,
valid question.
it's a version of the Salesforce question, but in a
Of
legal
course.
term. Yeah.
So anybody who's adopting any cloud-based solution should obviously vet the vendor. I can only speak to us. We are SOC 2 Type 2 certified, as well as ISO 27001, which these are the highest standards of cloud-based basis. I will say as well, sometimes there's a relationship with a customer and it may go sideways and a customer wants to get their information off of Minutebox. We don't store the information in a proprietary format, meaning if someone just wants to take their data and go to another solution, they can simply download everything in a CSV format, PDFs, and be on their merry way. We function from a perspective of, we want that relationship to be the reason why they want to stay with us, not that they're compelled or required to stay with us because they can't get their information off. So there are all kinds of redundancies and backups and processes that organizations and firms can take when using something like Minutebox, but it's an absolutely valid question, especially as more and more information is moving into the cloud.
I guess the follow-up to that is, isn't it your responsibility to protect your own business model, to create that kind of interoperable, non-obsolescence set of standards, so that yes, if something should happen with your company, it could be moved easily and no one would lose the archival knowledge of the interrelationships that they had put into your system.
Sorry, I don't quite follow the question. Are you saying we should allow for this, or we shouldn't allow for this?
I think the doomsday scenario should be protected against, and that protection would drive the use of your system. That
Yeah.
the doomsday scenario would say, you can always go to 3 other vendors and have the portability. Not that we're recommending those vendors, but as an emerging legal tech frontier, we have the same interests at heart, all 3 peer competitors.
Certainly. Our goal is to help our customers and to build strong relationships. And like I said, we want the software itself to be the reason why they stick with us, but we're not the right solution for everyone. And so giving them that option is definitely one that has helped us grow with the right people.
Enjoy
Great.
a beer
So-
at Gibby's.
Okay, maybe we want to turn it over to our other speakers. So maybe we'll give Peter the last question, and then Sean, if you could share your email address so that folks can reach out with any additional questions, that would be great. Peter.
Absolutely.
Yes, the system tracked the provenance of information entered into it, so you could determine who it was that entered information, and also if the information was entered through an automation, which automation was responsible for it. In case you discovered there was a glitch in the automation down the road, you'd be able to identify all of the individual records that might have been affected by that, so that you could review them and fix the problem.
Great question. Yes, we have an internal audit trail which tracks who entered the data, what data was entered, and nothing we have is written in stone, and that you can always go back and make the changes you need to afterwards.
Great. Well, Sean, thank you so much for that introduction. It looks like a really great service and very useful. I'm excited to kind of learn more about where you're going to take it in the future. So please keep us posted. And so, yeah, quick round of applause for you on behalf of everyone. And we'll turn it over to our next speaker, which is James from NL Patent.
Hi, everyone. James from NL Patent. I'm going to be talking a bit about search engine technology and patent search in general as well. So let me just get my presentation working. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about semantic search and search engines more generally, and the future of prior art search, basically. So prior art search, for those who are less familiar with IP world, it just sort of means kind of search of basically, like, you can just think about it as patent search for these purposes. Yeah. So first, I'll give a bit of a sort of intro. So most search engines that you'll interact with today are keyword based, but recently a new breed of search engine has emerged that in many ways is far better than traditional search engines. And today I'm going to talk about the differences between semantic and keyword search engines. I'm going to show a quick demo of our product, which is a semantic search engine at the end. So before we get into what semantic search engines are and how they work, first I'll give you some context. So this is, talk quickly about how do traditional search engines work. And to start off with that, I'll explain the indexing process, or in other words, how documents are stored within a search engine. So traditional search engines or keyword search engines work by creating what's known as an inverted index. This means that you take all of the keywords within the document and basically you produce a lookup between each word and the document and the documents where that word can be found. So in the example on the right, you see we've got all the words that are found in the various documents on the left. So we've got file, patent, download, search hard, and you can see the word file can be found in documents 1 and 2. So this is how keyword search engines are able to produce, very quick, are able to search through, often billions of documents very quickly and show you documents show you documents extremely fast. because they're just going through this lookup. And so a search engine now, so now we've got our index. Basically, you're ready for sort of a keyword search. And the way this works is pretty simple. You basically just break up your query into words, and using the index, you find the documents that match these words. So in this example here, we've got the query patent, and we've identified that it's found in documents 1 and 3. So we've returned those documents to the user. Now, there are a bunch more tricks you can use to improve how keyword search engines work, but at their core, this is basically what's happening. Now, how do semantic search engines work? So semantic search engines work in a very different way. So whereas the building block of the keyword search engine is the keyword, the building block of the semantic search engine is the embedding. So what's an embedding? An embedding is basically a mathematical representation of meaning encoded as a vector. And a vector is basically just a long list of numbers. So embeddings can represent individual words like bank or river, or even entire documents like a patent, for example. So you can see these are examples of embeddings at the bottom of the slide here. So how do you measure similarity between word or document embeddings? So in the example on the right, we've got 3 word embeddings represented in 2-dimensional space. And we can tell the words apple and banana are similar because their vectors point in roughly the same direction. To be specific, we quantify similarity by using the cosine function, which you may or may not remember from trigonometry lessons. And so this is what a semantic search looks like end to end. So first you generate your query vector. So you generate the vector that represents the user's query. This could be either a single word or a large block of natural language text. And then you calculate the distance between the query and each of the document vectors using the cosine function. And then finally, you return the documents ordered by their cosine distance or similarity, where the closest documents returned first and the furthest documents returned last. So as you can see, this is very different how a keyword search engine works, basically. So it's quite interesting. Now, one thing I've sort of skipped over is basically how embeddings or mathematical representations of meaning are generated from just text. This is kind of a large field and goes beyond what we have time for today. But as a quick overview, there are many different ways of producing embeddings, some of which are better than others. But the important thing to take away is that the better your embeddings, the better your search engine. State-of-the-art natural language processing systems use deep learning models called transformers. And these include models like BERT or GPT-3. If you've ever heard of GPT-3, it's in the news quite a lot these days because of some of the amazing things people are able to do with it. So now we understand slightly what the difference between keyword and semantic search engines are. What makes semantic search engines so much better? So one of the key advantages that semantic search engines have over keyword search engines is their ability to use word context. So modern NLP technique can generate different word embeddings for homonyms by reading the word context and understanding that they're referring to different things. For a keyword search engine, however, a bank is just text. So it's unable to distinguish between a riverbank and the Bank of England, for example. Another advantage of semantic search engines is their ability to search with natural language. So semantic search engines allow you to search with natural language, whereas keyword search engines require some kind of Boolean logic to function. And so for anyone who's written Boolean queries for perhaps patent searches or any kind of other legal search engine, you'll know how time-consuming and error-prone this process can be. And being able to avoid this with semantic search engines is a huge advantage. And finally, and another advantage is basically that they're very good at handling the various quirks of language and grammar. So the word plays, play, played, playing all have similar semantic meaning, so should generally be understood in the same way. However, keyword search engines will frequently miss conjugations and other word variants because they're mostly just exact text matching. So, they'll basically not understand that these words are similar in meaning. They'll just say that the words are not the same, therefore they're not going to return as a result. However, probably the biggest advantage of semantic search engines within the context of patent search specifically is their ability to handle synonyms. So when you're dealing with patent search, you're dealing with unknown unknowns. You don't know what the language the drafter has used to describe the invention. So you're having to predict the kind of words he or she would have used. This is obviously a huge problem because even if the drafter isn't deliberately trying to obscure their invention from from you. By definition, patents deal with nascent technology, and the language to describe this novel technology might not have settled yet. And this means that the words you'd expect to find when describing invention might not actually be there. And so this is a huge advantage of semantic search engines. So, you can sort of understand that all these words at the bottom are similar in semantic meaning, even if they're not exactly the same, for example. And that's sort of quite important, because a keyword search engine, you'd have to list all of these keywords if you wanted to make sure you captured this concept. However, there are some disadvantages of semantic search engines. So one of the main disadvantages is that they're extremely complex to build, which is why you don't see as many of them. Keyword search engines are quite simple. There's lots of supporting frameworks and things like that allow you to build one quite quickly. They often need domain-specific training as well. For example, they might need to be trained specifically to understand patent language, or they might be, and they don't work across multiple languages as well. So you can't have the same semantic search engine model to search across French, English, German, and other language documents, basically. And finally, they're less interpretable. This is a common problem of deep learning and artificial intelligence systems, basically. It's often hard to know exactly why the model has recommended a specific patent as similar. So that can be a major challenge of semantic search engines as well. So yeah, I'm just going to give a quick demo of a semantic search in action, basically, and you'll get a chance to actually see our platform. So the query we're going to be using is a deliberately tricky query. We're going to be using the query, the invention is an autonomous robot Hoover for domestic use with a charging dock and battery. The Hoover should be capable of operating on an automated schedule. So this query is challenging for two reasons. One, we're only using one word that refers to the key concept here of cleaning, which is the word Hoover. And secondly, the word Hoover is actually like a Britishism for the phrase vacuum cleaner. So you might be more familiar with that term. And not to mention, it's also a brand name. So it's unlikely that IP professionals will have used this word very widely in patent drafting. So what we're basically asking the search engine to do here is see that the Hoover is the key word in this statement, and also understand that Hoover is a synonym for the phrase vacuum cleaner. It's synonymous to the phrase vacuum cleaner, which is much more likely to have been used in patent drafting language, basically. So I'll just play this video here. So you'll see it sort of end in action. So here we've entered in the query. And so this is the NL patent platform. So we're starting the search. The second step sort of not so important, but if you're interested, you can sort of specify your query to a specific technology area. We're just going to search across everything for this case to make it deliberately a little bit tricky. And finally, we get the results. So as you can see, it's quite quick. So you basically just copied and pasted the description, and now you're able to look at patents. So this patent is a Chinese patent. Domestic multifunctional household duty robot capable of being charged automatically. Seems to be referring to a cleaning robot. So that one seems to have worked quite well. It seems like the result is relevant to what we were talking about. Vacuum robot. Again, this one seems quite relevant as well. Based on the figures, it looks like it's definitely a sort of kind of Roomba type vacuum cleaner. So yeah, definitely a relevant reference for us as well. So again, it's picked up the key statement is it's looking for a vacuum cleaner. Again, from the title for this one, we can tell it's very relevant, robot vacuum cleaner, and the figures sort of show what this might look like. And for, I think this is the last one we look at, an autonomous robot vacuum cleaner. So again, another highly relevant reference that's been able to be found from this query. And the last one we'll look at, intelligent household automated cleaning sweeping robot. Again, very relevant to our query. So as you can see, even though the query wasn't very good and it was referring to concepts that were probably not referenced directly by the patent that we were looking for, or the patents we were looking for, we've been able to find quite relevant results. And now I'll just show you as well that you can actually combine approaches. So we've got a keyword, you can sort of do a bit of both. So here we're applying a keyword filter to our search. Now we're just refining results. So we're only seeing results that actually have the keyword Hoover somewhere in the document. So you can combine results, but we always recommend you take a semantic search approach first, and then you can refine basically. So yeah, I just realized in my excitement, I kind of forgot to introduce myself. So my name is James. I'm one of the co-founders and the Chief Technology Officer of NL Patent. Basically, I'm a software engineer by training. More specifically, I've kind of worked with artificial intelligence systems most of my career. But yeah, so
Great.
NL Patent is basically a semantic search engine for patents, and we do other sort of patent-related technology.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and it's semantic search is so needed in many areas of the law, and this is a great use case of semantic search. I see Tom has his hand up. Tom, you want to?
Hello, hi James. Great presentation. I have more of a suggestion for a way that you can perhaps demonstrate or validate that you have a better search engine than other search engines. And so now this is with respect to the US patent process. I'm not sure about other countries. So one of the things that you can do is, with a little bit of research, what you can do is you can find situations where patent applications were rejected because of prior art, right? And in that process, what you look for is first a rejection by the patent examiner, then it's usually reviewed by his or her superior. And then you can appeal it to a three panel. And so what you look for are those cases where the patent application was rejected and there was a 3-0 vote also rejecting the patent because of prior art. So you can find hundreds of those examples. And then what you do is, in theory, your search engine should be able to find that prior art, and, ideally 100% of the time or 95% of the time, whatever. And you can use that as a very objective way to compare your search engine versus what human beings are doing versus what other search engine results are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the industry definitely needs some kind of objective standard for assessing quality of search results. I think where we've gotten into difficulty is in query construction. So it's sort of like, how do you construct a query that you can compare across different search engines to basically try and find a consistent way of saying, okay, this search engine's a keyword search engine, this one's a semantic search engine. So how do you select the keywords and how do you select the text you input into each one? I think that's where you get into difficulty when you're trying to make an objective comparison of different techniques that are just so radically different,
Right. I mean, obviously, where you're comparing search engines where you're basically just, I've seen some cases where they try to just take a whole patent application and just put that into the semantic query. That's where you can do apples to apples, as you said. If it's a keyword search, it's a little bit harder to get apples to apples. But it's a idea I want to just pass along because that might prove helpful as you try to do comparisons.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we do use examiner citations basically in the training process for our model. So we use it as feedback for the model to basically learn better similarity comparisons. So it's something we do incorporate into the product, but mainly from a data science perspective and not so much from I would say, like sales or marketing perspective to demonstrate the strength of the engine. But it's something we've thought about. It's just tricky, I suppose. But yeah, thanks. It's interesting that you sort of like identified that so quickly.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tom. And anyone else has a question, please speak up. Any other questions? Are you
a quick question on this, Roland? It's Robert.
Robert, go ahead.
Can this work with ontology standards like Sally.org?
With ontology standards, how do you mean working with it?
Well, are you familiar with Sally?
No, I'm not. I'm
okay,
sorry.
well then we could take that offline. I don't want to hold you up. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, great. And is this sort of what's your business model? Are you licensing this or making the service available to patent law firms or? That's
Yeah, so we
the version.
we license the product to a combination of patent attorneys, patent law firms, and big corporates who basically file large numbers of patents, and so therefore, have to do searching as part of their sort of R&D process. We find that they find the semantic approach a lot easier to use than keyword search engines, so it requires less specialist training. It also requires less kind of in-depth patent knowledge. So that's why they like the approach sometimes when compared to sort of other mechanisms that have been used to search for patents in the past.
Got it. Great. Well, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, James. Where are you located, in the UK or Canada, or where? US?
I'm based in the UK, but my co-founder is based in Toronto.
Got it. Okay, great. Well, if you could perhaps share your email address too, so people could reach out with any additional questions. Really great presentation. And I really appreciated you explaining, the different, how semantic search works compared to keyword search. I think that was really useful. And yeah, great to have you. Thank you so much. And let's turn it over to our last but not least speaker, Mark from Alexei.
Thank you, Roland. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here. There we go. Excellent. So let's see, just pull up the chat so I can see. Perfect. Great. So hi, everyone. My name is Mark. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at Alexei. And we're an AI company, and our mission is to build an AI that knows the law, or at least manifests comprehensive knowledge of the law. So it's a bold vision, long-term kind of vision with lots of intermediary steps. And our first product is fully automating the production of legal research memos. This is, in our view, this is where a lot of the knowledge of the law kind of happens within a law firm, is doing legal research. And fully automating legal research, in our view, requires automating the production of legal research memos. And they're not necessarily formal memos, but we in the way we designed the Alexei memo, it's a summary, a synthesis of information across multiple documents into a single document. And it's this, in our view, is the right deliverable. It's the right end state of legal research products. For the same reason that judges have to write these long judgments. They're inherently complex questions. Legal questions are inherently complex, unlike questions like how tall is the Eiffel Tower? You could type that into Google, you get the answer right there. Legal questions are inherently complex and require this summary and synthesis across multiple documents into the production of a new document, and in this case, the legal research memo. And we have, so every time somebody submits a question, we produce a memo using AI, and then we have human lawyers, human editors on our team that add some content, remove some content, and this has, and ultimately confirm the memo before sending it back to our customers. And this has led to month-to-month compounding improvements in our AI. The human involvement, the human in the loop, as it's often referred to, allows for this amazing positive feedback loop between engineering and the product. And so as the engineering gets better, turnaround time of the memo comes down, the product gets better, which collects more data. So then the engineering gets better, and it's this wonderful positive feedback loop that we think leads to really strong defensibility. So one thing that we think a lot about is not just innovating on the product and getting really compelling products, but especially in the legal field, in all industries, this is important, but really innovating on distribution. And we've yet to see, I think there might be some examples, but probably I would argue that there haven't been any true examples of a product-led distribution. Like we see in a lot of other vertical SaaS industries that really has started to take off. But this is something that we're starting to see work really well now for us. All lawyers go to Google to begin their research, and so providing some content, some excerpt of a memo to get people to our site. This content that can surface in Google search results. And a lot of this content, it was generated from our AI. We generated this content to train other models. And this has been a really compelling way for us to now acquire customers. And our growth has been really significant over the past couple of years. We have well over 300 customers now. These are separate law firms. And we work with everywhere from solo practitioners right up to some of the largest law firms in Canada and now in the US. Early last year, we launched in the US, in California and New York, and now we're available across 8 states. And it's our goal within the next 6 months to be fully serviceable right across the US. So that's all the presentation. I'm happy to jump in and answer any other questions. The product is fairly self-explanatory. So there's if you go to alexi.com, we've got a full list of if you click on the resources tab, you can see lots of sample memos there, so you can get a really good idea of what the product looks like.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mark. So so a couple of questions. So one is, what are the sort of data sources that your AI uses to generate the memos? And one of the things, there are lots of memos out there already from law firms. I know here at the law school we had, I think, at least one project where they were actually pulling together all the law firm memos that the law firms published through COVID, with regard to COVID issues, and there are thousands of memos from top law firms, memos that humans created. And so that's different from you have the AI generate the memos using a variety of different data sources. So first question, what are the data sources? And second question, how do you deal with the sort of the everlasting question of unauthorized practice of law in those situations? I assume you will say, well, this is just information and not legal advice, but have you been sort of like, did anyone sort of raise that issue, and how do you answer that question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It comes up often. We've thought a lot about it. We've done quite a bit of research on it too. But to answer the first question first, we put together our own proprietary, as a collection, our own proprietary data source of case law, all primary law. We license case law from Fastcase, so that provides a big source of case law data. One of the unique and fortunate differences with our product as compared to like a Westlaw or a Lexis, a quick law product, is for us, comprehensiveness of case law in the memos is not a key value prop. We're not a database search tool. If there's most case law is redundant. It's not really adding anything new to the body of law. And so those cases are not really that important for us if they're not authoritative on even a very nuanced kind of issue. And this can be as specific as just the facts were slightly different, even though there was no new legal principle. So in those cases, those would be important. But most cases that are out there that are part of the 10 million collection that a Westlaw or quick law might claim to be, are not really adding anything new to our understanding of the law. And so for us, we work really hard to make sure we have the most authoritative and any case that is adding in a substantive way to our understanding of the law. And so we work to put that database together. The other thing is so the second question, all of our customers are law firms, and so this has been a big reason why we feel confident now that we're not engaging in the practice of law with this product. We've had several opinions on this. Many bar associations agree with this. Also, we've yet to encounter anyone that actually does disagree with that anyone in a position of authority that would claim we are engaging in the practice of law. We've yet to run into that, and One of the big reasons certainly is that our customers are only lawyers and law firms right now. But if that weren't the case, I still think it would primarily be just legal information. One really important thing that I talk often about is the way we see AI impacting the legal field, the legal industry more generally, is this. It's really important to recognize this distinction between subjective work and objective work. And what I mean by that is subjective work is advocates doing something to advance the interests of a client. So they're trying to work towards achieving a goal, protecting the rights, advancing the interests of a particular client. And in our view, my view specifically, it should only ever be humans doing this work. For the same reason, if aliens landed on Earth, we wouldn't let aliens protect, or there's a conflict of interest. You know, we want a perfect alignment of interests with humans doing all this subjective work, helping to advance the interests of other individuals. But I define this subjective work fairly narrowly, and there's a huge array of work that lawyers are doing that would fall into what I would call this objective realm. And I think this objective realm, questions like what is the law objectively, what are the facts objectively, what were other variations of that would fall into those two buckets most likely. And this is the kind of thing that AI is going to completely take over. It's just a matter of when, and I think it's likely in the nearer term future than what most people would suggest. So if thinking about that, I think that will help us as we start to resolve some of these ideas of what it is, what does it mean to engage in the practice of law, and where does AI fit in that? I think this is a really useful framework to help us try and figure that out.
And just in terms of your approach, this is all basically legal information retrieval and NLP techniques that are here used here, rather than
so there's
knowledge representation of
no there's significant numerous innovations, not just from a AI NLP science side, but from an engineering side. So we have, in addition to, we used to think about having a production system, and we do some R&D, and then we release a production system to be used. And then that evolved to, okay, well, how about we have one production system, but then let's replicate this to have 10 other production systems all working in the background. And as soon as we see one outperforming the production system, we just move that one into production. And so it took quite a bit of time to build this engineering to get this production system in place. Now, where we're moving, and we see a lot of other R&D, engineering R&D, I guess, in this space, is how do we get all of these systems? We used to see them as different systems that we're experimenting. How do we get all of them working at the same time, and all trying to predict what the answer might be, and finding a way to evaluate them to say, okay, which one's more right in this instance? And then you can imagine, okay, how do we scale that from just 10 different iterations to now 1,000 or 10,000 or more, perhaps? And this gives us the chance to get much more accurate results every single time.
But
so another way to look at this.
But it still sounds like, dude, mostly, you're leveraging statistical AI methods, distinguished from rules, sort of trying to formalize certain areas of the law in a sort of rules-based knowledge representation approach.
There's various things. So we have what we called a Lex rank, which does incorporate some of this symbolic representation, but a vast majority is just entirely in the vector space, and various technologies such as information retrieval. Obviously, that's important. Text summarization is a big part of the technology stack. Various iterations of text summarization models that are working. Fortunately, we don't want to try and rephrase or paraphrase legal text that much. So there's abstractive and extractive text summarization. We do quite a bit of extractive text summarization, and that can get us pretty far. But there's a lot of pure natural language generation, character by character, that we're working on in R&D that isn't in the product product yet, but yeah.
Got it. Cool. So we have 1 minute. Maybe there's someone else who has a question. I don't see anyone. Mark, maybe you could also share your email address.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, it's right here. It's right here. Sorry, it's right on the screen. Thank you very much. Yeah, this is very cool, and sort of you're like really going down sort of like the robo lawyer kind of path, and although you did say it's you're enabling law firms mostly and not like replacing human lawyers.
Yes, it's a really important thing that I try and there's two important messages that I try and communicate as much as possible. One, people are vastly underestimating the capacity of AI even today, but especially 5 to 10 years from now. I guess we go through various stages of the hype cycle, but in my view, people are vastly underestimating what it's capable of. Two, it's really important for us to figure out how are AI and human lawyers going to work together. And I think people should be talking about this more. And in my view, the right framework is this subjective work that I think human lawyers should always be doing. Not AI, not aliens, but this objective world that there's a vast amount of work that AI will completely take over, and that's just going to make legal services far superior. It's going to make the profession far better, more enjoyable, and everybody comes out better in the end from a business perspective, personal perspective, societal. So,
here. So that's a great way to close this session today. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, Hirsch. Thank you, Sean and James, for your really great presentations. It's been a really awesome session. And Hirsch, thank you also for bringing your cohort of Liz incubated companies here and to share with the CodeX community. I think we really found this conversation very engaging and stimulating. And thank you all for everything you do to advance the state of the art in legal tech. And so, yeah, quick round of applause for you all. And we will close here. Just quick question to Susan. Do we have a session next Thursday?
November 3rd. So we'll see
November 3rd.
everybody week after next.
All right. See you on November 3rd. Thank you all. And yeah, take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.